Okay, I want to give all New Yorkers an update on the very dangerous situation coming up this weekend with the heat. Want all New Yorkers to be aware that this is an extraordinary situation and everyone must take precautions. We're going to talk about the things that the city government is doing, but I also want people to hear loud and clear that everyone needs to be aware of the extent of this challenge and make the kind of adjustments to protect yourself and your family so that we can get through the next few days okay. So we're entering a heat emergency. There will be extremely hot, as I said, potentially dangerous weather this weekend. If the temperature as predicted could break 100 degrees on Saturday, that will make it the hottest day in New York City in the last 7 years. And I want everyone to particularly focus on Saturday, which is going to be the worst day. All these days we're going to take very, very seriously, but Saturday in particular is the day to be very, very careful about. So let me now update everyone on the forecast as it is now and what the city is doing to prepare. I'm going to emphasize, and we've been through this with other weather emergencies, the forecast changes frequently, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, sometimes the timing changes, so there'll be regular updates. Sometimes you'll get them from me, sometimes you'll get them from our emergency management commissioner. Constantly check for updates so you will know what's going on and you can make the adjustments in your life as well. First, I want to thank all the members of my administration. Everyone has been working very hard over these last couple of days to get ready for this situation. The heat wave starts today, and at this point is predicted to go all the way through Sunday. Again, that could change, could be shorter, could be longer, but right now the prediction is now through Sunday. And I'll go day by day for you. Today, the high is predicted to be 91 degrees with a heat index up to the mid-90s through 4 p.m. today. There is also the possibility of heavy rain and thunderstorms today. There's a flash flood warning that will be in effect starting at 2 p.m. and will go through 5 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday. We will get a small break on Thursday in terms of temperature. The high is predicted to be 83 with a heat index of 85 through 4 p.m. Thursday. But then the heat returns and intensifies over the weekend, starting on Friday. Again, the hottest temperatures each day between 1 and 4 p.m., but we take the whole time very, very seriously. Friday, predicted high of 92 with a heat index of 98. Saturday, predicted high of up to 100 degrees with a heat index of 109. So again, it's going to feel like 109, which is obviously extreme heat. Sunday, high temperature predicted to be 98 degrees with a heat index of 103. I'm going to go over some of the different things that people should do to be able to prepare yourselves for this situation. Again, take this heat situation seriously, take precautions, particularly when it comes to folks with any kind of vulnerability. Look out for anyone with any kind of disease or a condition that might make them vulnerable. Look out for anyone who needs extra help in this crisis. First precaution is very straightforward. Stay indoors to the maximum extent possible. Stay out of the sun. If you don't need to be outside for work or for travel, stay indoors. The more time you're out in that extreme heat, the more time you're out in the sun, the more challenges you will face. Second, whenever possible, use air conditioning to stay cool. We know, and we'll talk about, obviously, that we assume people are going to be using a lot of air conditioning. We want to make sure we balance the need for people to stay cool with the amount of electricity that's being used in the city. We want to avoid an overload of our electrical system. I will say, because it's a summer weekend, a lot of people will be out of the city. In this case, that's a good thing. But we still want people to be mindful of staying cool, but also trying to limit whatever electric consumption they can. So the way to do that is to set the thermostat to 78 degrees. So we're going to be doing that for all city buildings starting on Friday through Sunday, where any city activities we're setting to 78 degrees. We're calling on private businesses to set 78 degrees, homes as well. That is the best way to make sure health-wise you're safe, but that we reduce any amount of strain on the electrical system. We have opened approximately 500 cooling centers all over the 5 boroughs to keep people cool. Amongst the locations are libraries, community centers, senior centers, and parks recreation facilities. So all of those locations will have a temperature of 78 degrees or cooler. All of those locations will be someplace that someone can go to be safe and to keep themselves cool. The cooling centers have opened today, and they'll go through at least Sunday. The hours initially will be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We're looking to extend those hours. We'll have an update on that. Saturday in particular is the day we are concerned about, so we're going to be extending those hours. We'll get the exact details. Anyone who needs a cooling center, so if you don't have air conditioning available in your own home or with a friend, a neighbor, a family member, and you need a cooling center, you can call 311. Again, 500 locations around the city. Call 311. You can go online, nyc.gov/beattheheat, and get those locations. We know that a lot of times when it's very hot, New Yorkers seek relief by opening fire hydrants. There's a way to do that the right way, which is to get a spray cap from your local firehouse. Do that because you don't want to do it the wrong way, which will make it harder for our firefighters to have the water supply they need. God forbid there is a fire by that hydrant. So there is a way to do it. All you got to do is go to your local firehouse. They will give you the right kind of cap. As I said, check on your neighbors, especially seniors. Check in on them. See what they need. We got to make sure in this situation that our seniors stay cool, that they hydrate. If they don't have air conditioning and you can't get them to air conditioning nearby, the cooling center is the right option. With our children, of course, children don't want to go outside. Please take precaution. All parents, all guardians, take precautions. Make sure they don't get overheated. Keep them hydrated. We can say that good options are to go to our playgrounds where the sprinklers will be kept on till dark. And we're extending hours at our Olympic size and intermediate size pools on Friday through Sunday up to 8 p.m. each day. I want to stress, and I'm saying this as a parent myself, never leave your children in a car in this kind of condition. Even if you leave windows open, it still may not be safe. So do not leave your children unattended in a car during this heat wave. I know there's many, many New Yorkers who care deeply about their pets as well. Same reality. Do not leave your pets in a situation where they may be endangered in a car. Simply leaving the window open some is not enough. And for anyone who is feeling the effects of the heat, I want to emphasize, and we have our health commissioner here, you'll hear from her in a moment, but heat stress can be fatal. If you have symptoms, that includes trouble breathing, rapid heartbeat, or you feel dizzy or nauseated, call 911 immediately. Do not take a chance on this. Call 911 if you're feeling those symptoms. We want to get you help right away. And again, anyone with chronic medical conditions, the heat's going to put on additional stress. We want to make sure that if they need help, we get it immediately to them. If they need to be kept in a cooler place, to get them to one of the cooling centers. Any questions throughout this crisis, people can call 311 or visit nyc.gov, and we'll constantly be updating that information. Just a few words in Spanish, and then I'd like you to hear from some of my colleagues. Está haciendo mucho calor. Y este clima puede ser peligroso para muchas personas. Por favor, eviten el sol y beben mucho agua. Verifiquen la condición de sus vecinos y, si pueden, usen aire acondicionado. La ciudad ha abierto centros para todas las personas que necesiten un lugar para refrescarse. Llaman al 311 para encontrarlos o para cualquier pregunta que tengan sobre la ola de calor. With that, want to bring forward our Emergency Management Commissioner. She has been in the discussions with us these last days on how to prepare, and it's already evident that her extraordinary experience all over this country dealing with a variety of crises and challenges is giving us a lot of capacity. We're very, very happy to have her as part of the team. Emergency Management Commissioner Deanne Criswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to emphasize again that heat is often an underestimated disaster and can be very deadly, and it should be taken very seriously. It can be extremely dangerous. The temperatures that are forecast, as the mayor stated, for the weekend are very hot, with a heat index well above 100 degrees as we get into Saturday. I want to remind everyone that's listening that these temperatures can be extremely harmful and deadly to vulnerable populations as well, like older adults and people with medical conditions. The best way to beat the heat is to use an air conditioner. And if you do not have an air conditioner, get to a cool place. As the mayor stated, we have approximately 500 cooling centers open throughout the 5 boroughs to offer relief from the heat. And again, to find your nearest cooling center, you can call 311 or go to nyc.gov/beattheheat. These cooling centers will be updated continuously throughout the event and throughout the weekend. We have also issued an advanced warning system message to communicate with healthcare providers and others who work with vulnerable populations, and city agencies and their community partners continue to check in on their most vulnerable clients. We are also in communication with Con Ed and PSE&G to monitor the electrical system throughout the period of this extreme heat. New York City Emergency Management is also working closely with all of our city agency partners to keep New Yorkers safe during this time. We are hosting daily conference calls with our partners, and our EOC will be open on Friday with some of our operational partners to monitor conditions and rapidly respond if necessary. We have also been in communication with elected officials, private sector partners, faith-based organizations, as well as nonprofits to provide updates about the heat, and we will continue to provide them updates throughout the weekend. We also want to remind you to stay informed. Follow @NotifyNYC on Twitter or download the app on your smartphone to receive the latest updates on the heat conditions. A couple things to reemphasize as far as your safety. Avoid strenuous activity, especially during the sun's peak hours between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. If you must do strenuous activity, or if you want to exercise or walk your pet, do it during the coolest part of the day, which is usually in the morning between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. I took my dog Wilson out this morning earlier than normal because of the anticipated heat. And also continue to be mindful of your furry friends. They can dehydrate quickly and during this extreme heat, so make sure that you're giving them plenty of fresh, clean water. And again, as the mayor stated, never leave them inside a parked car on a hot day. Even with the windows open, extreme temperatures inside these cars can be extremely dangerous to them. And finally, and very important, I want to encourage everybody to check on your neighbors. Extreme heat affects people of all ages, but some New Yorkers are more vulnerable than others, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of our friends, our neighbors, and our family, especially those that have chronic medical conditions. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I want to bring up our Health Commissioner, Dr. Auxiris Barbeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Griswold. As the city's doctor, I want to warn every New Yorker that hot and humid weather, like what we're experiencing today and through the weekend, can be deadly. In New York City, more than 80% of heat stroke deaths in recent years have involved people who were exposed to heat in their homes without air conditioning. The best way to prevent heat illness is to stay cool in an air-conditioned place. If you have air conditioning and you haven't used it until now, today is the day to turn it on. And we want to remind folks that setting it at 78 degrees will keep you cool, healthy, and will help keep your bills down as well. Also, it's important to take things slow. Reduce, eliminate, or reschedule strenuous outdoor activities without air conditioning if you can. If you normally exercise outdoors, as was just said, do it in the early morning or after the sun goes down. And it's also a reminder not to overexercise your pets as well. For those without air conditioning, frequent tepid baths, showers, instead of cold showers are what we recommend. And additionally, we want to remind New Yorkers of the signs and symptoms of heat-related illness. Heat stroke occurs when the body's temperature rises quickly and can rapidly lead to death. Call 911 if you or someone you know is displaying the following symptoms, signs and symptoms. So you can have either hot, dry skin or cold, clammy skin, confusion, disorientation, nausea and vomiting, trouble breathing, rapid heartbeat, weakness, or dizziness. All of these are signs that you need to get to medical attention ASAP. I also want to close by stressing these very important points. The safest place for infants, seniors, and people with chronic illnesses, including mental health conditions, is a place with air conditioning. If you have family or neighbors who are older or have health difficulties, check in on them and make sure that they're staying cool. Avoid strenuous outdoor activities. Drink plenty of water. Hydrate with water, not with alcoholic beverages, not with caffeinated beverages, but with water. And as was said, can't say it often enough, really checking in on neighbors. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now, our Social Services Commissioner, Steve Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, I wanted to highlight a number of the actions that we're taking to address some of our most vulnerable residents, both through our Department of Social Services and our Department of Homeless Services. In terms of our Department of Social Services clients, we're reaching out to them, making sure that they are in good, safe circumstances. With respect to people that are on the streets, I want to emphasize again that we have plenty of capacity in our shelters. We have available beds for anyone. If you see a New Yorker in need, call 311, and either one of our outreach teams or NYPD homeless outreach team will come out and address the person's needs. During the weekend and in these heat conditions, we have redoubling our outreach teams in terms of focusing on the individuals we know to be on the streets. As you know, we have a by-name list, and the individuals that are on the streets are known to our outreach workers, and they will be working double staffing to bring people in, to offer them beds that we've got in our system. We have, again, I want to emphasize, a bed for anyone who wants to come in, and this is a period of time where if you've got a friend or someone you know, please try to convince them to come in, or call 311 and we will send someone out to convince them to come in.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We're going to take questions on the heat situation, and then we'll take other questions thereafter. First, on the heat situation, Melissa.
Mr. Mayor, we've been reporting on community centers in the City Housing Authority that are without AC. Can you explain to us why so many of the Housing Authority's community centers, 1 in 3, are still without air conditioning in mid-July?
So let me first give you the state of play, and then I'll speak to the underlying problem, and I appreciate your reporting very much. So 149 cooling centers in the Housing Authority. I want to remind everyone, overall, we have over 500 city cooling centers. The Housing Authority centers for this event will be able to get their temperatures to 78 degrees or lower to allow people to be safe. So everyone should know you can go to any of the 149 centers to get that cooling. Now, to your underlying question, why were they not all put to their full air conditioning? I'm not happy about that either. I think it's a mistake. I want to get a report back from NYCHA about why it happened and how quickly they can fix it. This is something that was talked about days ago, should have been fixed already. But at least I can say that for the central need we have right now, which is to make sure that folks can be kept safe, those centers can keep people safe.
Are you saying, just to be clear, are you saying that the 49 that don't have air conditioning now will have some sort of air conditioning before it gets dangerous?
Correct. And they can keep the central question for us is, can you get it to 78 degrees or lower to make sure people are safe? The answer I've been told and I believe is yes.
I have one other question,
Please.
and then I'm done. The city sent out a bulletin last night with a link to its website, and on the official list of New York City cooling centers, where people might even try to go today or tomorrow, some of those centers that don't have AC are on that list.
Again, the obligation of the Housing Authority, and I made it very clear to them, is to get those centers to 78 degrees or lower by any means necessary so people will be safe.
In the 2020 executive budget, there were 12 NYCHA senior centers that were being decommissioned that were being underused, 5 of them are in Brooklyn. Are there any additional measures that are being taken to make sure that people that live in and around those areas have access to a place to cool down?
Yeah, in those cases, and I know there were specific actions taken on each one that were different, but let me just give you the broad answer. One thing that we know is the Housing Authority has lots of ways of communicating to the people who live in the Housing Authority. We're obviously communicating with all sorts of other means as well. In every case, there was a nearby senior center. So the senior centers obviously also are cooling centers, meaning just a regular neighborhood senior center. Those are also cooling centers. In each of those instances, there was a senior center very nearby. If any additional transportation or anything is needed, we'll provide it.
Unacceptable length that someone would have to go to get to a senior center in your view?
I'll ask our aging commissioner, because we actually have science about that, how close senior centers are supposed to be to people. Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, come on over.
Thank you. Great. When we designed the plan, we were looking at centers that were no more than 7 blocks away from a particular senior center. And if that 7 blocks became an issue for any person who was a participant of that program, we would provide transportation.
During this heat wave, we'll have someplace to go.
Yeah, you speak about the NYCHA thing or in general? Just help.
I was talking to him about the NYCHA centers that he was referring
So
to.
between you and Health Commissioner, anyone who's got the standard, let's explain.
They are 224 senior centers open for this particular crisis, and they're open beyond their regular hours of operation. And we are working to ensure that we have coverage over the weekend, and that's what we're working on right now.
Will there be extended hours at the city's beaches?
Where's Mitch? There's Mitch.
The extended hours will just be for the pools, and we're also extending the hours for our over 600 spray showers throughout the city. For beaches, they will continue to close at 6. They get millions and millions of visitors. We have to make sure we can get to clean them and service them so that they'll be clean for the following day. So it's just for pools and for spray showers.
Why not? I mean, beaches in the city are generally cleaned. I mean, I know a lot of trash pickup is the next morning. Why wouldn't, I know in years past and at state beaches, they usually extend the hours. Why not in 110 degrees?
Fair question.
We have not done it in the past. It's something we could look into in the future. We've mobilized all of our lifeguards and all the staff at our pools to prepare for extended hours to 8 o'clock. Something we could look into in the future, but in terms of our operations, to make sure we're prepared for the next day, we are going to continue to close those at 6 o'clock.
So let me jump in, I'm sorry. I think it's a very valid question, and given the extraordinary nature of things, we should reconsider that in this situation. So hearing the commissioner's fair point that it may mean we don't get to do the servicing we normally do, and understanding we would only do it if we had the lifeguard coverage. Because remember, last thing we want to do is solve one problem and create a new one. But I can just say very simply, Commissioner, let's look into right now what it would take to get that additional coverage and extend some hours. I think New Yorkers would accept less clean beaches to have the relief of the water in this situation. Go ahead. What's that?
I mean, they're usually not clean.
Well, they do their best. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, you talked a lot about the cooling centers. Last year, WNYC went out to try and find some of those cooling centers. There was supposed to be signage that OEM had put up so that people who don't have access to internet can also find where these locations are. And the signage was not there in a lot of places. What have you done to ensure that people who can't go online to find a cooling center can know that those signs are up this time?
Will be straightforward. I don't know if someone here is familiar with the specific signage issue, but I think the central question is to promote the notion to all New Yorkers, and we need your help to do it. We know what these places are: libraries, community centers, senior centers. We want people to know that they are there. Anyone who doesn't use internet can call 311. So I agree with you. We should make sure the signage is clear, and if someone has a nice, clear answer, otherwise we'll get it back to you in the course of the next few hours. But I want to not make it seem to people like they're hard to find. If you can go online, you're going to get an absolute up-to-the-minute list. If you don't go online, call 311, and you can ask for your neighborhood and get the exact location. Yes, Greg.
Where are you going to be this weekend?
Here.
So you decided to stay here because of this?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so tell me how you feel about the potential for something that happens unexpectedly. When you're in
Greg,
a
we've been over this, and I'll go over it again. When we know something is coming, I'm going to judge it and act accordingly. If we don't know something is coming, then the question is to respond to it effectively, make sure things are being handled, and act accordingly. So it's all depends on what we know. Here we have a clear indication that something's coming. Who has not gone? Yeah.
Following up on that, did you have some sort of a campaign activities or anything planned that you decided not to do because
Yeah,
of
of course. Yes.
What were you going to do?
I would have been out in one of the early states, but this is obviously a major situation, and it's predicted to go through Sunday, so I'll be right here. Yes, Gloria.
Mr. Mayor, any concerns about, I know the blackout last weekend was determined not to have anything to do with usage.
Correct.
But is there any concern related to that since the temperatures are going to get a lot higher? And have you had any conversations with Con Ed
Yes.
to ensure that they're prepared for that?
Yes, and I will say, look, I'm talking to Con Ed. We're all talking to Con Ed. Emergency Management's talking to them all the time. I spoke to the president of Con Ed last night. I'm getting a lot of assurances, but I'm also very upset with what happened on Saturday, not just because it happened, but because we're still getting mixed messages about why it happened. You know, originally we were told it would take a long time to get an answer, then suddenly they had an answer the next day, but they still have not been able to say exactly how they would avoid that scenario again. Yeah, it's the first blackout in 13 years. Yes, they resolved it in 5 hours. Those are good things. But I don't know exactly how they would handle that situation again because they're not giving me a straight answer. What I think is different about the usage question, one thing that is factually true is on the weekend, and the worst day is going to be Saturday, a lot of people in July are out of the city. In this case, that's helpful to us. We still have to take the usage very seriously, which is why, again, I'm ordering all city buildings to go to 78 degrees and will continually remind people to only use the energy they need. So I want to believe that since Con Ed has a lot of capacity, and they obviously are prepared for this kind of scenario, that they will handle it properly, but I still have not gotten the answers I want about what happened last Saturday.
There's been some power outages in Staten Island over the last 2
Right.
days that I know you've been monitoring.
Yep.
But have they determined if that's tied to usage or something else? And is that a sign of what's to
The
come?
Staten Island, the last outage got resolved pretty quickly. I don't know if Deanne has an update on underlying cause and what it might tell us. There's an outage now in Coney Island, which they're predicting gets resolved by when? 2 p.m. I have not heard how these things might interrelate. Do you have a thought on that, or do we need to get back? Okay, so let's come back to you on that with a,
It's only in Coney Island right now, that outage. By
far
chance
as we
yet?
know. Okay, come on over so people can hear you.
Staten Island was caused by a feeder from what we're being told. Everybody has returned to full power on the grid. Coney Island is just happening. We are sending responders there as well to work with Con Ed, and they expect an estimated time of repair of 2 p.m.
And what's the number?
Affecting Coney Island right
The
now.
number is 1,700 customers in Coney Island.
No.
With all those caveats, do you have faith in Con Ed's ability to keep the lights on?
I am in a jaded place about Con Ed right now. I want to have faith. Again, it's a very good thing that most of the time things work. But right now, you know, the performance on Saturday, they did a good job getting the power back, but it is not comforting that we don't have a clearer answer about what happened and what they're doing about it. It's just not. I do believe they have a lot of redundancy in their system. I do believe they don't want to see a blackout, but I'm not happy with the lack of answers.
Do you think Con Ed's been moving quickly enough to replace all the aging electric equipment in the city over the last several years?
Again, I don't want to pretend to know all the details of what they've done. If you look at the big picture, I see some good things in the fact that we have not had major disruptions, but I don't have enough of a vantage point to know if there's more that they could have done with what they have.
Have they given you any answer about why the 13,000 kilowatt cable failed on Saturday
Now,
night?
that's exactly my frustration. I'm not getting a clear enough answer.
If something like what happened this past Saturday happens again, does the city have a contingency? Let's say it happens, I know this is hypothetical, but happens during the middle of the day in 100-degree heat. What does the city do? How does it mobilize? I know, again, parameters are different, but...
Right. I will start and Commissioner Griswold can certainly speak from her experience about the kinds of things you would do. But look, there are a number of facilities that have backup generators, obviously starting with our healthcare facilities. So the ability to get people with real need to some place, we have that capacity. But anything that would happen in the middle of the day would put a huge, huge strain on this city, unquestionably. Our first responders, who did a brilliant job on Saturday night, of course, they would be there for everyone. We have more first responders than anywhere. So we would go and we would help people and we would try and get them to the cool places we had. But it's a situation that should make everyone, in my view, a little worried that those kind of scenarios we don't have a perfect solution for. And that's where I want Con Ed to reassure people by helping us know how they're going to avoid it in the future. And I'm disappointed that they haven't given us a clearer answer. Yes.
I was out last week at one of the apartment buildings that was raided by ICE. And
Wait, can we stay on this? We'll go to ICE in a moment. It's a heat wave, okay, yeah.
The city's done really good with messaging not to open the doors in these kinds of situations, but now that we're expecting more and more of these summer emergencies, how will the city prepare for advising and helping those who may or may not be in danger?
I wouldn't accept the notion that we're expecting more and more of these summer emergencies. I just don't agree. This is an exceedingly unusual situation we're facing right here. The last time we had 100-degree temperature was 2012. So this is literally the first time, as long as I've been mayor, that we will hit 100 degrees. So I just don't accept that this is going to be a typical thing. I want people to not make the mistake of thinking this is typical. They should actually treat it for what it is, an exceptional event, and get ready for it accordingly. But there are two very different realities. The first thing we got to do is make sure people are safe here and now. We'll talk about the ice raids in a moment. They've been sporadic. I don't see anything huge happening here. I'm much more concerned right now about the health of people in the middle of a heat emergency. Who has not gone? Anyone's not gone? Okay, Melissa.
Mr. Mayor, speaking of frustration and getting answers, I just want to come back to the community centers for
Please.
a moment. Some of the seniors who go to these centers to keep cool in the summer and some of the parents of kids who are supposed to be in camp in these programs are frustrated. They feel like this isn't the first time. They say it's happened 3 summers in a row. So they also, some of them have raised the question of whether you're focused on this. Are you a little checked out? What's going on?
I'm focused all the time on making NYCHA better. And Melissa, you've seen, I have to give historical perspective. You've seen my predecessor mayors who ran away from NYCHA. I've put massive amounts of time into trying to turn around NYCHA and put huge resources in. And you saw in the heat situation in the winter, a huge change last winter compared to the one before. We have to fix these centers. But the first litmus test will be, can we get all 149 to get to the temperature of 78 degrees or below, which is where people are safe? That's the order I've given. I've been assured it will happen. But I share their frustration. I mean, it's July. This 149 centers is a finite number. And actually, they did it right with 100, so why not do it right with the other 49? I agree. They should be frustrated.
So what have you been told about why those 49 don't?
I don't have a good answer. I want a good answer. I will say we are trying to change a lot of things quickly at NYCHA. It's a huge operation that's been underfunded for decades, so not everything is going to get fixed immediately. I understand that. I think as we now will have a long-term leadership team, are going to be able to do more faster, and Lord knows we're putting the resources in. But this kind of thing drives me crazy. It's so obvious. It's not hard to do. It should have been fixed. Anything else related? Yes, please.
I have a health question.
Yes.
Real quick. You said something about tepid water over
Let's get the health
showers.
commissioner to.
What's the science and reasoning behind that?
Taking cold showers is more of a shock to the system than taking frequent tepid showers. It just gives the body more time to acclimate to the temperature differences. The real benefit to taking frequent showers is to really just sort of dissipate the heat, and it can be done as effectively with tepid water with less risk.
And speaking about what you should be drinking and should not be drinking, water's the only thing. Like iced tea. I'm honestly, like, people drink a lot of iced tea. What are the things you should be drinking?
Very specific question.
I drink iced tea. That's why I'm asking.
Water is always the best. There's certainly other drinks such as iced tea, such as juices. The point here is not to drink caffeinated beverages because what they end up doing is making you lose more liquid than you retain. And also not drinking alcoholic beverages because, again, they dilate your cardiovascular system and they cause you to lose more fluid than you retain. So water is always the safest. Sports drinks, iced tea, nothing wrong with that.
What concerns do you have regarding, and this might also be a health department question as well, but for the mayor as well, what concerns do you have about public transportation in this heat? One, a lot of people end up being on these platforms in subways that have no ventilation. And if the trains are not running efficiently, they can't quickly get onto an hopefully air-conditioned car. Can you talk a little more about that? And for the health commissioner, same thing. Is there any advice you would give to people who might be in a situation where there's not a lot of ventilation, especially like a subway station?
So the most important thing is to be prepared for the situation at hand. Carry water with you, dress in light clothing of light colors that can give you freedom to move, and to take frequent breaks in the shade. I think that there may be situations where it's challenging to avoid the heat, so for example on subway platforms, but if you're prepared in carrying water, dressing in appropriate clothing, I think that's the best way to remain safe.
So to the other part of the question, look, again, I want to be careful. We got to inform people and we got to prepare people, but we also should not assume things that we don't know yet. I don't assume that the MTA is going to be dealing with any different reality than normal. You know, to say the least, I don't run the MTA. But right now, what we understand is we should have a consistent electricity supply. Therefore, the MTA would be running on whatever weekend schedule it runs on. To your question, though, I worry a lot about people on the subway platforms because even if it's running on the normal weekend schedule, it is a lot of time between trains. I think people need to do everything that Dr. Barbeau said, but also be really mindful that if you don't need to go somewhere, don't go somewhere. It's kind of like we say in blizzards. This is now the heat equivalent of a blizzard if we're going up above 100 degrees. Don't go out if you don't need to go out. It's not business as usual. So if you're going to, normally you would go down the subway and you wouldn't think of standing there for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. It's going to feel really bad down there in this situation. If you don't have to go, don't go. Anything else on heat, please?
This heat event isn't going to be localized to New York City.
No.
So have you had conversations with the governor's office and trying to coordinate some of these issues that will impact the grid and other statewide issues that we need to be aware of?
We always coordinate with the state in any situation like this. It's an ongoing effort, and our teams are talking all the time. Right now, from what I am seeing and hearing, this is much more about making sure we take care of individuals and get them to what they need, and that people are just smart about energy usage. We're not hearing at this point a particular challenge to the grid if we handle things normally. Again, because ironically, it is a summer weekend when so many people are out of the city, the demand in the city should go down very, very substantially. But we, out of an abundance of caution, are trying to make sure we are careful about the usage. So I'm much less concerned about that right now as I am of making sure that everyone who needs help is getting help immediately. Because this stuff you heard from Dr. Bubbo, these symptoms, they can come on you really quick, and we just need to make sure if anyone thinks they need to be in a cool place, we gotta get them to a cool place. If they're feeling those symptoms, we gotta get a first responder to them right away. That, to me, is the most important thing. Yes?
Stupid question. You said...
There are no stupid questions.
That's wrong. You said that city buildings would have their thermostats cranked up to 78 degrees as a way to try to cut down on power usage through the heat wave. Does the city have the authority to order office buildings, many of which will be empty over the weekend, to do the same?
I will always be careful, since my lawyers are not present, about exactly whether we can order or whether it's encouraged or what rules we can use. We'll come back to you. It's a great question. I don't think it's stupid at all. We will come back with the answer. I do think that generally the private sector cooperates in these situations. They understand it's serious. They take it seriously. But I think it's a very good question. And Commissioner, you will work with me and our law department to confirm if there's any particular tool we need to use. Okay. And again, to your question, this is uncharted territory for me because this is the first time we've had this level of heat in my administration, so it's a good question that we will answer.
Specific question, Dr. Barbeau, iced tea.
I was gonna call that one too.
Is a caffeinated.
Did you mean decaf iced tea?
Do you want to clarify that, just for the viewers?
So the most important thing is not to drink caffeinated beverages. And so if one chooses to use iced tea as their preferred beverage for hydration, yes, it should be uncaffeinated or decaffeinated. The other thing I want to just sort of note is in terms of the health risks, since this event will extend for a number of days, it's especially important to check on neighbors every day to make sure that they're keeping up with their hydration, to make sure that where they're living remains cool, so that if conditions change, then they can be moved to a safer place. So we want to make sure that folks understand that these are issues that, especially for health consequences, the more days go on with heat, the greater the risks in terms of potential adverse effects.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I understand there's a triathlon scheduled for Sunday?
Yes.
Anything?
I'll start and then Commissioner Criswell will weigh in. I respect the rights and freedoms of all Americans. I don't quite understand why the triathlon organizers want to continue with their triathlon at this point. We had a situation like this, I think it was last year, not this level of heat, obviously, but it did, I believe, overlap, and I would think this is an exceptional situation, but I know we're in dialogue with them right now.
Yeah, as a triathlete myself, and wanting to do that triathlon, I'm glad I didn't sign up this year. We have been in communication with the city's event department, talking to the event organizers themselves. They are looking at the options to perhaps shorten the run. They will make a decision possibly the day before, but maybe not until the day of. But we are going to continue to consult with them, provide our guidance and advice as to what we think the potential safety issues might be for the participants.
Additional resources that the city's gonna have to provide if they do decide to go on with this to sort of mitigate the, whether it's OEM or first responders?
What I will say is that, again, our EOC is going to be activated with multiple city agencies in it. Our Emergency Operations Center, thank you. Our Emergency Operations Center is going to be activated with multiple city agencies so we can respond quickly as needed. We are working with the fire department and EMS to ensure that they have adequate resources to support anything that might happen as a result of any of the events that are going on this weekend.
Okay, last call. Anyone else on the heat situation? Once, yes.
Mr. Mayor, do you think you would be going out of town this weekend if there had not been a blackout the previous weekend?
Again, it's really clear, and this is. But let me try and give you super easy ground rules that were true, 8 weeks ago before I was running for president, and they will be true always. When we know something is coming, and when it's a weather situation, we are given advance notice that something is imminent. Any mayor in their right mind sticks around to make sure things are okay. Some mayors have not done that. That's a mistake. Now, when you have no indication whatsoever that something is going to happen and it happens, then the question is immediately making sure the team is where they need to be, the right actions are being taken to monitor the situation, come back as quickly as possible, and deal with it. So it's just an absolute consistent reality. I have before traveled to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I've traveled to Albany. I've traveled to Washington. I've been on family vacations. This is not a new reality. When you know there's a problem, you have to address it. Yes?
Did you cancel? What did you had stuff
Yes.
scheduled. What did you
Yes.
cancel? What did you
It was
cancel?
going to be a variety of events in early states. I don't have the chapter and verse. You can talk to the campaign. Specific things. Iowa was going to be one of the locations. Again, that's all I got for you. Go ahead.
This is just one other follow-up on the triathlon. I mean, can the city just revoke their permit? Could the city tell the organizers, you can't have this event?
Again, I am not a lawyer. I find that a very tempting equation. And I think the commissioner has an immediate conflict of interest, and she is a triathlete. But Commissioner, I don't know, or of any of my colleagues, I don't know the legal dynamic of canceling an event. I think it's a great question. Again, we have not had a heat emergency like this that has begged that question in the last 5.5 years. So unless you happen to know a few weeks on the job the answer, we will come back in the course of the day. It's a very good question. Yes, there are no stupid questions.
Circle back to Greg's question. Can you talk a little bit about how the decision-making and whether or not you go or doesn't go changes based upon how hard it is to get back?
It's
Coming
the
back from
same.
DC, there's a train every hour.
Yeah, but you know what? It's if you think something's happening, you don't go to DC even. I would disagree with that assumption. It's very straightforward. If there's something coming up, you have to get ready for it. If there's no expectation of a problem, you go about your life. Okay, last call on, okay, other topics. Other topics. Yes.
Mayor, you've been very careful the last 5 years talking about the due process that Daniel Pantaleo is entitled to and all the rules and regulations with the police department. But what do you tell the family now that we've waited this long, 5 years, and they say it's just simply too long? What do you tell them?
Well, of course they're right. And first of all, every American is entitled to due process. So that's something I'll say anywhere, anytime to anyone who's critical, right, left, anywhere. Everyone has a right to due process, and every single one of us would want that right to due process. But the mistake here was believing that the Justice Department was going to do its job, and they didn't. And that's unfathomable to me, Dave. It's been 5 years. There were many points along the way where it seemed like the Justice Department was poised to make a decision up or down, just a decision. And they consistently told the NYPD not to proceed until recently with the administrative action. That's why I've announced a new policy that, unfortunately, I'm sad to say it, we have no faith in the Justice Department anymore. I don't want to ever see another one of these incidents happen in New York City to begin with. And I really believe from my heart that's the central thing we need to work on, is that there never be another tragedy. But God forbid there is, we will start the departmental proceedings immediately. We're not.
We have the answer from the Justice Department. Why can't you move forward now that we have a final word?
Again, the trial is almost complete, and the answer will come in August. We've been definitive about that. Gloria.
I know you spoke to the question this morning on the radio about why you can't legally fire Officer Pantaleo, but I guess my question to you today is, now that we know what the Department of Justice has decided, I want to ask you specifically if you have any regrets over how you handle this whole situation. This will undoubtedly become a part of your legacy as mayor of the city. Is there anything you wish you would have done differently?
I regret that I trusted the United States Department of Justice. I really do. And Gloria, I said it this morning, but I want to say it for everyone here. I grew up watching the Department of Justice act as the protector of civil rights and civil liberties, and taking on racist policies and taking on state governments and local governments that were treating people unfairly. And I always believed, no matter how strange the politics were in our country, that the Justice Department would keep to that standard. I have never seen anything like this in my life. They failed to act in any way for 5 years. And what I regret was believing that the old rules still applied. They don't. So, you know, we were told not to proceed with the departmental trial, and there's a reason under normal circumstances, and all of our lawyers affirmed it, that in fact it could undermine a case brought in court for other charges, and those would obviously be potentially much more serious charges as opposed to just status of employment. And that logic made sense. But it doesn't make sense anymore, seeing the way they've handled this and that we have no guarantees in the future. I have urged that there be a federal law or executive order that will mandate that they must make a decision within a year. I think that's a fair timeline that would give everyone a much greater ability to have faith in the system. But this is a staggering situation. It's horrible for the Garner family. It's horrible for faith in the justice system. Of course, if I had known, I would have said, well, you're telling us not to, but we have to because we can't have any faith in you.
From the day that Eric Garner died, from how you responded, everything that followed after, besides not having placed your trust in the Department of Justice, anything you wish you would have done at the city level and at the departmental level, which you do have control over, as opposed to the Department of Justice, which you have no jurisdiction?
I believe in my heart that our job is to stop these tragedies from happening. I really believe that. And this morning on the radio was a very honest and meaningful exchange. And I believe that my job, upon seeing that happen, was to make sure it never happened again. To change the way we police New York City, to change the way we train our police, to change how we make sure there's transparency, like body cameras, to change how people see each other through neighborhood policing, through implicit bias training, and all those things have happened. And I think policing is very different today in New York City. And I hear that from community members. Obviously, ending stop and frisk. There's so many things that are different, and people tell me it's different. They're experiencing something different. That was the thing I knew we could do. I had in a million years, could not have believed that the Justice Department would act the way it did. It literally was inconceivable. So I will say I take responsibility for not assuming the Justice Department would not do their job. If I had thought that was possible, then I would have said, let's go ahead, regardless of what they say. Marcia.
Mayor, I wonder if you, as a person, think that Eric Garner should, if you think that Daniel Pantaleo should be fired. Secondly, will you ask the police commissioner to fire him?
Marcia.
And third, how will you keep the peace in the city with 11 demonstrations being planned because people are upset about the decision?
Again, this is a city that respects everyone's right to speak. We've always done that. And the NYPD does an extraordinary job and works with protesters very consistently. And, there is no place in this country that does a better job of protecting people's democratic rights while also keeping peace and keeping order. So we will absolutely do that. I'm not going to venture personal opinions. This is part of what I tried to be very honest on the radio this morning. When you're the steward of the entire city, this is not about personal opinions. This is not about, letting any situation take away what are supposed to be our path to justice. There's supposed to be due process. There's supposed to be due process. It's something we need to honor in this country. The problem here is the due process did not happen on the federal level. It was an injustice of the highest order. Here in New York, the trial is almost done. There will be a decision next month. That will be the end of the process. So I'm not issuing an opinion because I respect that this process has to play out.
To be the president of the United States who wants to lead the nation, you should have an opinion in something that has roiled this country and the city for 5 years.
I feel very strongly as someone who wants to be president that what leaders do is look at our legal system, look at what matters for making our institutions work for people, and not because of political gain or because of personal opinion, do the kinds of things that undermine our justice system and our ability to be a fair society. I want this system to work. I want it to be fair. And being a leader takes a lot of restraint, and being a leader takes a lot of patience. And I've learned that certainly on this job many, many times. But I also believe in my heart, Marcia, I understand why everyone feels such pain over a lost life, a human being and a family in pain. But I also think leaders have to prove that we can change things. I believe in my heart that we're in a very different city today than we were 5 years ago. And the amount of systemic change in policing has been constant and intense, and is deep-seated now. And I believe we've taken the kinds of steps to avoid such a tragedy. That's what a leader has to do.
To share your belief.
Of course they are in such pain. I understand that.
They don't take comfort in your words.
I'm not surprised given what they've been through. I wouldn't, if I were them, take comfort in anybody's words. They will only see a result and they'll judge the result.
What do you say to them?
I say to them that we are devoted to having a fair process. Please.
I have one on this issue and then I have one on another issue if I can.
Yeah.
I understand that the state law says that the police commissioner makes the decision, but a lot of people are saying, okay, but the police commissioner reports to you, you're his boss, you tell him what to do. Why can't you tell him what outcome you want to see in this case?
Again, I've asked the lawyers to be very clear so everyone follows the law, which is our obligation. The law is clear. There has to be due process. That due process leads to a judge making a recommendation to the police commissioner. The police commissioner makes a decision. But I think it's very understandable people asking the questions. And again, I respect the intelligence of all New Yorkers, so I'm going to speak to them as intelligent people. Judge when this is over. It will be over in August. Then everyone can issue their judgments. You had a second question?
Your campaign accepted a contribution from the president of Triangle Equities, Lester Petracca, who's a company that does business with the city, and chose to keep it despite the fact that he personally was put on the doing business database 2 days after the contribution. Can you explain why you're accepting that contribution?
First of all, the federal law which governs here makes no distinction about whether someone's on doing business or not. We added that restriction ourselves. But people go on and off the doing business list all the time. I've worked with it for many years. It is an ever-changing list. We held a high standard. We held a clear standard. At the day the contribution is made, if you're not on doing business, you're not. That's how we treat it. We accept a donation. If you are, we don't accept a donation. It's as simple as that. That's the standard we're holding. Yeah.
2 questions, Mr. Mayor. The city did not move forward with the administrative trial until 2018. So, after 2 years, 3 years, why did you not come to the conclusion that you're reaching now that the Justice Department wasn't going to act?
Again,
why did it take 5 years?
Because I've said it before, but I'm happy to say it to you. The Justice Department specifically requested, and remember, this was in the previous administration. Let's get our timelines right. 2.5 years basically under one administration, 2.5 years under another administration, very, very different administrations. The Justice Department specifically, consistently said, do not proceed with a departmental trial, because if we choose to bring charges, that will undermine our case, because a whole bunch of information will have been aired publicly in a way that they found counterproductive. That is the United States Department of Justice, not under this administration. When the new administration came in, we were all trying to understand, would the Department of Justice continue to operate in a way consistent with the past, which it had, by the way, under Democratic and Republican administrations. The Justice Department, to some extent, continued to be consistent, regardless of who was president of the United States. We did not know how much things would change. They continued to say, do not proceed with departmental trial. Finally, there was a conversation between our lawyers and the Justice Department where they said, now we are going to remove that restriction. And that's when we proceeded.
You've been criticizing President Trump since before he was elected.
Absolutely.
You held a press conference the day after he was elected talking about that New Yorkers were in jeopardy because of his policies. So back in 2016, why did you not see that the Justice Department may not behave in the way?
Well, the first question was, it wasn't 2016 because the new administration didn't come in until January 2017. And we did not know, it's a very pertinent point, we did not know up until literally the final hour if the previous administration would act. When the new administration came in, just as I said to you again, I'm going to say it to you very clearly. You have the benefit of hindsight in July 2019. I'm going to argue strenuously to you, the first months and the first year of the Trump administration in particular, people did not know how the Justice Department would act. In fact, you'll remember, Sally Yates and other people, there was a big question about whether the department was maintaining its independence. And we were not presuming. They had asked us not to proceed. If we had proceeded, then it would have been fair. You would have had every right to say, didn't you just take an action that would have undermined their potential action? It's all horrible. It's all unfair. It's all painful. If we had a crystal ball and we knew they weren't going to act, what you're saying would make all the sense in the world. But now that we know what we know, we've just changed the policy outright, because until we see a day when we can believe in the Justice Department again, we're not waiting on them. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, at a press conference yesterday to announce the expansion of City Bike, the DOT Commissioner Polly Trottenberg had said that the expansion, which is only partial to the city, would take 4 more years because she only has a team of 12 people to do outreach to communities. Now, as you know, all forms of public transportation are subsidized by the public, except for City Bike, including your own ferry system, which is great, but is used by fewer people than the City Bike system. So why not invest city money into City Bike so Polly Trottenberg can expand the system faster and, in fact, to the entire city, which would require some public money?
It's a great question. To date, One, we've had a situation where we weren't required to invest city money, and our goal is to not invest city money whenever we don't have to. You know that in this last budget process, we put a PEG program in place. We're stopping some of the things that we've done in the past because we are increasingly concerned about the budget. So if we have something that's been a great success and has not required city money, honestly, it's not my impulse to say, now let's start putting city money in. I would consider it as we approach the next budget if we think compared to other options it makes sense. I would say to you, there was no way, in my opinion, to start us on a system of a true citywide waterborne transit system without the city taking the lead. And I believe, understanding there's concerns and critiques, I believe when you come back in 10 years or whatever time in the future, people will say, actually, that was a smart thing because it became a much greater part of our transit system, especially when we cross-register it with the MTA, which we will, I have confidence. So the answer is, fair question, something we will look at, but I stand very comfortably by the notion that certainly up to now, not subsidizing it has still allowed us to get the result we needed, and there's other things that needed a lot of help.
One follow-up,
Please.
though, because the city does charge City Bike for the parking spaces that the docks take up. So that means that City Bike is actually subsidizing the public rather than the other way around. Why not just waive that fee so that we can have these docks sited quickly?
Again, what we've seen to date is a system that has steadily expanded and has worked with an approach that has not cost the taxpayer money. And that's ideal. You're asking a fair question. Is it time to reconsider? I'll certainly look at it, and I'll look at it as we look at the next budget for sure. But I do want to emphasize part of the appeal of going this deep into City Bike was that it did not expose the city financially. Yes, in red, yeah.
2 years ago, this is another DOT question, the DOT established what they called priority districts. These were areas in eastern Queens and Brooklyn where there were high cyclist fatalities, low amounts of cycling infrastructure. They established 10 of them, but in 8, injuries have gone up in the time that they've been established. So what's your plan to make sure that those injuries start going down?
Well, we have a lot more coming. Obviously, in the immediate term, DOT is going to come out with the next plan to address this immediate emergency we've had with the horrible deaths of the cyclists, and that's going to be in the next days. On the bigger front, Vision Zero is going to continually expand. The speed cameras, huge piece of the equation, which, remember, up until just a few months ago, we could not have dreamed of having 700 schools with speed cameras. That's going to make a big, big difference. More and more street changes coming, more and more bike lanes coming. There's a host of things, and I'm going to keep raising the enforcement levels as needed. And this is a good thing, against a tough backdrop and real challenges. Every day the NYPD continues to drive down other forms of crime. It is freeing up NYPD resources to address the needs of pedestrians and cyclists, and I am confident we'll have those resources.
I think you would say on the city bike issue that a lot of the concerns that people had when this first was starting to be rolled out did not sort of come to fruition. Given that a lot of elected officials in the outer boroughs are sort of asking for this or asking for city bike, why go through this lengthy public review process? Ultimately, that's what's taking so long, right?
Yeah, so it's a fair question. One, I would caution that there's obviously a huge debate everywhere we go on these issues. So I would say, and I don't think this is a unfair characterization, a lot of folks in the media very fairly ask questions, rightfully trying to address the issues, and with a certain sympathy for the cyclist community. I hear lots of times from elected officials and from community leaders who are worried about what they see as problems with bike lanes. We're trying to balance all these things. In the end, there's been many a time, many a community board that said, don't put it in, and I overrode. So I got no problem taking that heat. But there are valid discussions that we try to have with people before implementing. Can we speed that up? I think that's a fair question, and I would like to speed it up, so that's something we'll work on.
If I may, can Chief Harrison discuss how the illegal sale of tobacco is policed in the city in the aftermath of Garner? And then I have another question.
Sure.
Good morning. So one of the things that we take a look at is we're getting community complaints regarding anything. If we get a large amount of complaints regarding untaxed cigarettes, tobacco sales, or anything else like that, there are people that are being plagued by this. We have to address it. As as public safety. So depending on the 311 complaints that we're getting or at the build-a-block meetings that we're having with the neighborhood coordination officers is how we determine how we prioritize enforcing complaints that come into our department.
Since the
Not
Garner
at all.
situation?
Not at all.
Wait, but I want to, you're asking an important question, but there's another piece to it that has to be addressed. That same police force in the last 5 years has been retrained multiple times in de-escalation, which clearly would have changed this dynamic, that horrible, painful day, and implicit bias. So I think you're asking, I don't want you to be too lawyerly, if you will. The narrow question is, do we still address quality of life conditions? Yes. Do we address them the same way we used to? No. This is a department that uses arrest a lot less than it used to. Also very pertinent to what's different between 2014 and now. 2018, 150,000 fewer arrests than 2013. And we got safer. So please, and I know you're conscientious, but report the whole picture. Yes, we do quality of life enforcement. We do a lot fewer arrests. We do a lot more de-escalation. We have officers who have been helped and supervised and trained to think about the situation differently, and I think it's a different reality. Go ahead.
I think I see Commissioner Vita behind. Can she discuss, or can you discuss, the situation with ICE? I know there was some activity in Midwood and Sunset Park yesterday.
Yeah, and I will start and then turn to the commissioner just so everyone gets the basics. And again, it's a very painful reality for everyone out there. There's a lot of fear. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers right now who are feeling tremendous fear. And one of the things the commissioners often talk to me about is you can have a family where one member is an American citizen, another member is a permanent resident, another member is undocumented. So this is not just the 500,000 undocumented folks, it's all of their family members. There's a huge number of people in fear. And we have an administration in Washington that makes these bold announcements and then backs off them, and you never know what reality is. So here is, after everything we were told was going to happen, Saturday through today, there have been 8 specific situations that we have documented where ICE agents attempted to arrest someone, none of them successful. 4 on Saturday, 3 on Tuesday, 1 today. 4 of them in Sunset Park, 1 in Harlem, 1 in Midwood, 1 in Far Rockaway, 1 in Bay Ridge. That was the one today. We were told there'd be this massive blitz, and so far, again, 8 situations strung out over 5 days. So, Commissioner, take it from there.
Thank you. I would add that, of course, we're speaking to reports that have come to us that we found credible, eyewitnesses, photos, other evidence. We know that there are lots of activity of people expressing concern. We're making sure we have teams in those communities to share out the Know Your Rights information, connect people to legal resources. 311 is a 24-hour operation, and we fielded calls after hours. So it's really important. Of course, the full scope of this we might not know immediately, but as the mayor noted, it is important that we're just staying vigilant. We're not increasing fears. We're making sure we're being responsive to the needs of the communities as we see them, and we're sharing reliable reports with you all as we get them. Just responding briefly to your point earlier, of all the resources that have been described here that agencies are making available, I think it's important to remind New Yorkers that regardless of immigration status, you can access those resources. City agencies are not going to ask you your immigration status if you come into a cooling center or need support if you're calling 311. So that's really important.
Commissioner, can you just elaborate on exactly what happened today and yesterday in those locations?
Sure. I will be brief, and then maybe we can offline speak in more detail. We received information this morning. Actually, a staff person from the administration witnessed an encounter in Bay Ridge with a door being knocked and an ICE and DHS official seeking somebody in that location who was no longer there, and no arrest was undertaken at that time, and have since deployed staff to that area to be responsive and share that information with that building particularly. Yesterday, and I believe some of this has already been reported, there were 3 instances, one in Far Rockaway that we received from multiple sources, community partners, as well as video and the tenants in that location, of a similar attempt that was not successful. Midwood, a location was knocked on, nobody answered. The bakery across the street, the owner witnessed it and spoke to it. Also, we received photos of that location. And then also Sunset Park, a super received a knock, did not answer the door, and we've spoken with him and his wife.
Any other ICE questions while we have the
You went through the incidents. You said 4 in Sunset Park, 1 in Far Rockaway, 1 in Midwood.
And 1 in Harlem. And 1 in Bay Ridge this morning. Thank you.
Any other ICE-related questions while we have the Commissioner go ahead?
For you, Mr. Mayor, these ICE raids were something that the city administration had anticipated happening this weekend, and yet, you did still choose to go on your campaign trip. So why did you choose to leave town last weekend when you knew that was coming?
No, I spoke to it because 2 reasons. One, and this one has been played out, I did not believe the Trump administration. A few weeks ago, they said they were going to deport 11 million Americans. And they said they were going to start raids immediately, and they didn't do anything. Then they said they were going to do 2,000 people this weekend, and you've got 8 unsuccessful attempts over 5 days. I don't believe a word they say. You remember they said caravans were coming to your town to take over your town from Guatemala. I mean, come on. This is a charade. It's a political game, and what he's doing is trying to gin people up. They're not actually doing this work. They're trying to get people ginned up. It is a political act by Donald Trump. So 1, I didn't believe it. 2, I was convinced that the apparatus was in place to address it, and that Commissioner Mustafi and her team were going to be ready to handle the situations with all our other city agencies. If I saw something actually happening on a larger scale, that would have been the reason to come back. But this, unlike a weather event where we actually have, I have some faith in the National Weather Service, even though we've been surprised too often. I still believe what they tell us is basically on target. I do not have such faith in the Trump administration.
On a separate topic,
Yeah.
During the protest yesterday in response to the Justice Department's decision, there were a lot of folks who had very harsh words for you, not just the Garner family, a lot of elected officials. Jumaane Williams, public advocate, said that you couldn't run for president, you couldn't secure the Democratic nomination with the way this has been handled. Several people said that what has happened in New York City demonstrates that Black lives don't matter here. And so I'm wondering, how do you handle that criticism? How do you respond to that? And what do you say specifically to Black voters when you are on the campaign trail about what's happened here?
I have a very long, deep relationship with the community. I've been talking to people for 5.5 years in communities all over the city. And what I hear consistently is a recognition that a lot is changing in our neighborhoods, that the way we are policing is very different, that there's a lot more respect being shown to the community. After we ended the broken use of stop and frisk, I've had many young men of color come up and say their lives are different. I've had parents come up and say their children's lives are different. All over, I have had people tell me that the way the police work with them is different. I've had police officers say their experience with the community is different and better as well. So I'm not going to listen to a bunch of politicians. They all have their own agendas. I am very, very much at peace that we have changed this city and changed the way we police. And that is what everyone should be judged by. Did we change the things we could change? Have we done the things to avoid there being a tragedy in the future? And I think the answer is yes, there's still so much more to go. And it doesn't reduce the pain of the Garner family. But a lot has changed and a lot more will. Yes?
U.S. Attorney said yesterday that Daniel Pantaleo's trial gave them an opportunity to gather more evidence that might have put them in a position to bring charges. Did the Department of Justice ever indicate to your administration that the disciplinary proceedings could actually be helpful to their investigation?
Never have heard that at all. This is a conversation that was had frequently over the years. It's always the literal opposite until a few months ago when we got a clear message that they no longer cared if we went ahead with the departmental proceedings. We confirmed it again, and then we proceeded. Nolan?
How can the city and how can the Garner family take solace in a process that not only took 5 years, but involves the charges against Daniel Pantaleo never being publicly laid out, and a hearing where the transcript is never made publicly available? How can the city find comfort in that process?
We need to make a lot of changes. And the part of this that is about what the DA in Staten Island did That's one piece of this. What the Department of Justice didn't do is the central act in this drama, in my view, because it screwed up everything else. But in terms of the disciplinary process, the issues governed by the 50A law in Albany point out that there's a problem with that law, and I have consistently tried to get a change in that law, and one day it will be changed, but right now it has not been changed. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder if you have reached out to the Garner family since the decision yesterday to explain to them your reasoning behind not immediately firing Daniel Pantaleo, and so that they could understand your commitment to due process.
Yes. I have spoken over the years with members of the Garner family repeatedly. I reached out to their representative today to explain the state of play, and that's being passed on to them. Yes, Reverend Sharp.
And what did you say to him? Did he understand?
Of course, you can ask him, his analysis of it, but I believe he understood fully. I said this will be resolved in August. The trial is coming to a close. The judge's recommendation will go to the commissioner. By law, the commissioner decides. It will be resolved in August.
Did you ask him to pull back on the demonstration?
No.
Did you say to him that nothing would be?
I explained the facts. Yeah.
Have you done anything today to mark the 5-year anniversary of Eric Garner's death?
Again,
and do you plan to go to the rally at 4 p.m.?
I'm not going to a rally. I spoke to it at great length today, and I'm sure that word will get around. Again, I've spoken to it. Go ahead.
One more question on the fundraising numbers that came in. You have the fewest number of small donors in the entire field. I guess the question being, what are you going to do to make sure that you grow that donor base, which you will need in order to continue this process? And also a lot of them include New Yorkers with real estate and other business interests in the city. I know you spoke to it before, but how are you going to grow that pool, and what are you going to do to make sure that you're raising small number donations, which is what the other.
So the very simple answer. 7-8 weeks ago, when I got into the race, 3 central goals: to put together the resources to get started, which we did; to put together a staff both centrally and in key states, which we're doing now; and to have a strong debate performance to introduce myself to the American people. And I feel that I was able to do that. Now, you're absolutely right. The crucial piece of the equation is to build out that grassroots apparatus in the course of July and August. Very aggressive plan in place to do it, and I'm confident that we'll be able to do it. Gotta go, everyone. Thank you very much.